Okay, it's 10:31, so let's get going. Hopefully you're at the right place here. We're at the closing out state legislation session, priority areas of attention. Peter Birdsall, Doug Fisher, and Kelly Jensen are joining us today to speak about some of these initiatives. Next slide, Cynthia. My name is Aaron Heinzman. I'm the Corwin Senior Professional Learning Advisor here in California. There's my contact information. It will be shared again at the end of our presentation today. Next slide, Cynthia, please. A couple Zoom keeping reminders. I think we're all used to using the chat box now, so please open the chat box, submit any questions that you may have, or interact with other participants. Also, this webinar is being recorded. The recording and the certificate of attendance will be sent to you via email in a few days. As you can see on the slide there's the email that you're receiving the recording at and your certificate. So if there's any spam blockers or anything else like that, please just check for that if you get it in a couple days. Corwin has some upcoming free webinars that are first ones here on Monday. Please visit the corwin.com/webinars to register for any upcoming engagements. And please let me introduce our three panelists for today. First, Peter Birdsall is Executive Director of the Professional Learning Coalition. His experience in state education policy includes serving as a legislative advocate for numerous California school districts, county offices, and professional associations. Doug Fisher is Professor of Education Leadership at San Diego State University and a teacher leader at Health Sciences High. He has published numerous articles on teaching and learning, as well as books such as the Teacher Clarity Playbook, PLC Plus, Visible Learning for Literacy, Comprehension, The Skill, Will, and Thrill of Reading, How Tutoring Works, and most recently, How Learning Works. And our guest speaker today is Kelly Jensen, is the Director of Curriculum and Instruction for elementary schools in the Palmdale School District in Palmdale, California. She has over 20 years of experience in education, including 11 years in administration. Peter, would you like to go from here?
You bet. Thank you. Well, this is the first of a series of webinars to try and take what's happening at the state level and connect it to the real world of how you have to organize your resources and your staff to serve students. This particular one is focused on the key issues that came out of the end of the legislative session. The legislative session ended on September 30th. As you'll see, we'll cheat a little bit because we're incorporating an issue that's on the November ballot, so it's not quite all over, but primarily based on what happened in the legislative session. You have on the slide here my email address, so if there's additional questions later on, or you think circumstances change, want more information, please feel free to contact me. You move forward. Next slide. We're going to focus on given liberty here of identifying priority areas for attention. The four we're going to focus on are the Arts and Music Education Initiative on the November ballot, Prop 28, the Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant that was funded in the 22-23 state budget, transportation funding, which was also included in the state budget, and then finally a brief sort of outlook on what to expect in the upcoming budget that the governor will release his proposed budget in January. So next slide, please. So this is the one that obviously doesn't link directly to the legislative session. This is an initiative that was put on the ballot through the initiative process. It's on the November 8th ballot, so you will know on probably the night of November 8th, for sure I think by November 9th, whether it's been approved. We do expect it to pass. There's no argument against it in the ballot pamphlet that's been sent to voters around the state. It's supported by the California Democratic Party. The Republican Party did not take a position, so there's really no opposition. So I think the general, obviously we won't know until election day, but general expectation is it'll be approved. If it is, that means that schools will start to receive $800 to $1.2 billion a year every year, starting in 23-24 for the purposes of art and music education. So, the first obvious thing is starting on, assuming it passes on November 9th, you can start thinking about how are you going to do that in your district, your charter school, and how to build that into your program. That amount of money, it'll differ from district to district, but it's about $150 per student. So you can think in terms of that order of magnitude. It's the next bullet is significant. The initiative says it must supplement, not supplant what you're currently doing. So the one view is that means these will be new services. So that's obviously the whole purpose of the initiative, and it's really exciting. At the same time, it does say one of the most immediate things I think school leaders need to do is think about what you're doing this year, because what you do this year will become the baseline for this increased funding in the future. So if you do a huge initiative this year, then the funding from Prop 28 will have to be on top of that higher level of service. So there's a judgment you need to make there. That one is probably one of the more immediate ones you need to deal with. Since it will form the base for every year going forward. The other thing I think warrants, sort of begin to think about is the initiative requires that 80% of the funding be spent on certificated and classified staff to provide art and music education. So obviously some people are going to be real active and some are going to be moving more slowly on this. But it's reasonable to think the next spring there's going to be a real rush to find staff to fill these spots. So starting to think about how you're going to recruit or identify these potential staff, I think is real important. Next slide, please. The Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant is it's a one-time block grant, but it is huge, $8 billion. It's allocated based on the number of unduplicated students. So those are students who are low income English learner or foster youth. And it's about $2,400 per unduplicated student. So literally every school district and every charter school in the state will get some of this funding. The second bullet you see on this list here is the website you can go to get the department has announced the amount of funding that each school district and every charter school gets. You can go look up yours right there. This is funding that's available through 2027-28, so it has quite a long run, even though it's one-time money. And it has to be used for learning recovery, defined pretty broadly. It can be additional instructional time, can be tutoring, can be professional development. So I think you have a lot of flexibility within that general construct of learning and recovery. And a big difference from some of the things we've seen in the last few years, it does not require that your district or charter school adopt a plan, that you take a plan to your governing board and have it approved publicly. Instead, all the accountability is going to be at the back end to report on how you spent the money. So I want to be clear. Obviously, you want to plan how you're going to use this money, but you don't need to publish a plan or take a plan to the governing board specifically on this program. So I'm really glad we have Kelly and Doug with us here today, because I think one of the important things here, it's a huge resource. So how you use it most effectively to address the learning needs of your students. But at the same time, how do you align it with what you're already doing and maintain a coherent program rather than having all these separate siloed activities? And frankly, assuming Prop 28 is approved, you have the same questions on that one. How do you align into a coherent program? Next slide, please. The other one may be a surprise to some of you, because I think of the audience for these webinars as being primarily instruction and curriculum staff. But I want to talk for just a minute about transportation funding. In the budget, the legislature approved $637 million in increased funding for transportation. This is a huge change. When local control funding formula was approved in 2013, they basically eliminated all separate state funding for school transportation. The school district wanted to do more in the area of transportation. They had to pay for it locally. Now the legislature not only increased the funding, but said that on an ongoing basis, they will reimburse 60% of the cost. So obviously I picked numbers that are easy to calculate. If you have something that's going to cost $500,000 to provide a new transportation route, if 500,000 it used to be the district had to pay the 500,000. Now you can count on it's going to cost the district 200,000 and the state will pay 300,000. So that dramatically reduces the cost. And you do have one-time money to start these up and then get reimbursed in the future. This one does require that your districts adopt a local plan that's approved by the local governing board. It has to be adopted by April 1st of next year, 2023, and then annually every year thereafter. Next slide, please. So the reason I think this is so important highlighting in this webinar is the legislature, they don't say we're doing it for this reason. You can sort of read through the discussions and everything. It had a lot to do with expanded learning opportunity program, the initiative to provide 9-hour day for students in TK through grade 6, where that's a combination of regular school day plus after school programs or before school programs. So they want to make sure that school districts can start as an issue of equity, be able to provide transportation services. And you'll see the sentence in there for that local plan, you must prioritize transportation services for students TK through grade 6 and pupils who are low income. So again, that's another equity issue about access to career technical programs, after school programs, et cetera. So obviously transportation has important implications for the instructional program that you can offer. Next slide. And then finally, sort of the preview of Christmas's future or something like that. We know there's sort of a chill setting in out there. The governor, but there's a lot of press that state revenues are lower than expected. The governor vetoed a lot of bills in September with this following veto message. And the one that got a lot of play was with our state facing lower expected revenues, it's important to remain disciplined. So he's vetoing the bill. I wanted to highlight the last sentence. The governor said he was doing that because we must prioritize existing obligations and priorities. So on the one hand, it is true, state revenues are lower than we expected. On the other hand, the state built a lot of cushion in there in terms of reserves and one-time fundings. So we fully expect there will be funding in the coming year to pay for the cost of living adjustment and to honor the commitments that have been made to school districts to fund the expanded learning opportunity program and to expand transitional kindergarten over several years to serve all 4-year-olds. So, there is clearly a downturn in the revenue stream, but the commitments that have been made, I think, are going to be honored, and it's important to view it from that perspective. So with that, those are the 4 key areas that we see coming out of the budget and the election, since I threw that in there. I'd like to turn it over now to Kelly and Doug with those 2 questions I identified earlier, which is how do you use these resources to most effectively serve students? And then also, how do you align it with everything else you're doing so we don't just have another dozens of separate siloed programs? So thank you very much.
Thank you. Doug, do you want to start or?
Go ahead. I'm interested in, Kelly, in how you're thinking about the art and music specifically. And then I would like to eventually have some conversation about the learning stuff, about what we're seeing trending in that area. But I think it's interesting to plan for that art and music opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. Even though you don't have to have a plan, you really need a plan if you're going to do this. Couple things to think about. In Palmdale, we have our Palmdale Promise, which is our strategic plan. Actually, right after this webinar, I'm going to be attending a meeting. We meet often and we are constantly updating our strategic plan. So we're always going, and it's a live document. We're always going back and looking at our strategic plan. So with our strategic plan, we did include the arts, which is one of our areas of focus. So from that in 2018, we did write, we gathered we got a coalition together. We got all of our teachers together that were interested in the arts, and we formed a group and a team. And we kind of came in and we wrote a plan. It took us several months throughout basically the whole school year in 2018. And so when we wrote our plan, we came up with some goals and some priorities that we had. But there were some interesting things that came from that. The teachers felt like because we had a strategic plan and a superintendent and a board that were really into the really supported the arts, they felt like that was strong. But some of the things that we need to think about as this money comes in, and I think that the reason why I mention it is I don't think Palmdale is unique in some of the concerns about the arts. So some of them were talking about how, you know, there's such a focus on instructional minutes using language arts and mathematics, and how there isn't the time for the arts. I'm talking mostly the elementary, because our middle schools do have those courses, and how it's not a priority. And then, of course, funding and reluctant to teach art in the classroom, and for various reasons, because not just because of the time factor, because of the facility, right? There's lots of teachers that don't have a sink in their classroom. And so are you really able to do some great art when we're talking visual arts? Do you have really an opportunity to do that? So with that, we've also put in a lot of maker spaces into our sites so that we can use that for our STEAM activities. So that's helpful. So we've been doing that. So those are kind of some of the things that we've talked about is those were some of the barriers that we face with the arts. So with that, I think it's really important that everybody has a plan, and you need to listen to your teachers to see what are their thoughts, and kind of let some of that stuff come out, and so that you're able to address it and that you can move the arts forward. Because what we don't want is we want to use this money and these funding sources to really support a really great art program, not just buying a bunch of supplies. We don't have a plan, and people are going out and just purchasing materials and what's happening with those materials. So there has to be a plan, and how are we going to identify all the areas of the arts, and what are some things that we already have in our communities. Most of us have areas in our communities that people in our communities that will really support the arts. So what are some sources you already have in your community that you can build on? And then what are some of the things that you would like to see happening in your school, and how can you work together, go about that? But there has to be a message from our district, and as a whole, as in a team. We're talking everybody from the superintendent down to classroom teachers and the parents, that the arts are important and a very important part of our students' learning, and that it's not just set, put to the side and not something that we need to be putting into our classrooms. So, Doug, do you want to talk about the learning? Or
I'll make a couple comments on the arts as well. Pre-pandemic, we were asked to do a literature review on the arts. And it kind of falls into two areas: arts for art's sake, learning the arts, so the four major arts. There's also arts that contributes to critical thinking, literacy, and that kind of things, which are more generally known as integrated arts. And there's strong literature on both of these that say, here are ways to accelerate learning, arts for art's sake, plus integrated arts. And you raise a really important point about materials and classroom environments. And some of the arts, may make more of a mess, and so teachers are reluctant. But things like visiting artists to integrate into the classroom, teaching teachers, and I know we can't use a lot of the money for professional learning, but helping teachers, especially elementary school teachers, understand arts integration. And there's a fair body of research about the role that arts can play in early literacy learning, especially around phonemic awareness and early phonics learning. And so I think this is a potential to take on and say, what do we want to accomplish with this arts and music money? So, and I think districts will like yours, will take it on and say, is it supplemental arts? Is it arts for art's sake? Is it integrated arts? What are we trying to accomplish with this? And who do we need? So we already have shortages in these areas, but imagine everyone trying to fight for a music teacher or an arts teacher, who has a credential. People have really solved this in interesting ways with visiting artists who come into classrooms and do integrated arts work with especially younger kids. So there's a whole research base on this that we probably should figure out how to make available to people on this webinar, because then they can articulate what they want to accomplish with this money.
and being able to kind of think outside of the box, because so many classrooms have not really had some strong art programs in their classrooms. And also not just the visual arts, but also some of the performing arts. There's a couple of things too. I mean, I don't know, I'm getting older now, but my fondest memories of school isn't the lessons that I learned. It was the art projects and the performing arts that we did. I mean, Romeo and Juliet, I remember doing that. I remember we learned how to do a hula dance. And I still remember even doing visual arts, even far back as kindergarten. I remember making some things in kindergarten. And so I think there's a connection that students can make to their school and being able to have those experiences, but also to our families. When we do have some music teachers and band in our schools, in our elementary, and we have instruments and the kids get to take them home for practice. Bless their families' hearts that get to listen to those.
Yeah,
practicing every day.
Practice in the bedroom.
But giving them those opportunities. And so we have folklorical dancers, we have mariachi, we have lots of those types of we have a drum line. So those are the things that bring your families out too, that they can connect to your school. So it's not just arts education, it's having your families connected to your school and just loving. We have an art show every year where we collect art. We tell all the teachers throughout the year, start collecting all your art pieces, and we have a theme. And so it's just gotten bigger and bigger every year. And just seeing the parents come out and just love to see their students' art is really important. So you can really get a lot of community support and a lot of your parents that will love to come to your schools to see the performances and to see the art. So I think that's important too, because we need to connect more with our families. We know that. And this is just a great opportunity to do that. So just kind of thinking out of the box, we are going to have a hard time finding people. So do you maybe have some teachers move around and go to different schools and do some of those things? Do you have some great people that can come in, but you need a credentialed teacher inside the classroom? So perhaps you consider having the classroom teacher inside, so you have a credentialed teacher. There's just all kinds of things that we need to sort of consider and think about and ponder as we kind of develop these programs. But I'm really excited for our students because I think the arts is just so incredibly important. Mm-hmm. And from the art show that we did, we even the first year we did it was like, wow, our kids are so talented. And that was such a great opportunity even for us to see like the different mediums they used and the way they were able to participate in the arts.
Yes. And I bet I was just thinking about when you did those things in kindergarten, there was probably all kinds of language that you were developing,
yes.
vocabulary and oral fluency, all that was happening for you as you had those memorable experiences. If we could switch a little bit to the learning recovery stuff, where, as Peter was saying, it's a huge amount of money and it's one time. And so what I see a lot is permanent expenditures, salary increases, new positions. And we have to be careful with that because some of us are old enough to remember pink slips every year going out and the morale hits that caused. And now we're seeing with resignation culture, if I get a pink slip, I'm gonna go to another profession, another field. I may never come back to teaching. So I think we need to be really sensitive and careful with this. What we're seeing in some of the innovative places is they're overhiring like paraprofessionals that are already like associate degree and having them do intervention, acceleration work as they become teachers. So grow your own. Knowing we will have some attrition, we could use this as a grow your own, grow a teacher workforce inside there. So that's one of the things I'm seeing in some districts is this overhiring and focus on, but we're picking people who are wanting to be teachers, even if they're only going to work for us part-time and they go to college part-time. The other thing we're seeing is a resurgence of experts, reading specialists and math specialists, and really going back to those credentialed people who have a very high level of expertise, who can provide services for kids that are in need. I would like to point out, and this is not always popular, the effect of COVID there's been 3 meta-analyses on COVID so far on learning outcomes. The effect size is minus 0.13, which is pretty minimal. I know the NAEP is getting a lot of attention. John Hattie calculated the effect size on the NAEP scores and released it a couple days ago on Monday. The effect size is 0.08 minus. So we're talking about fairly minor changes. Having said that, these are average impact, and there's some kids who got way more disproportionate negative and some who did not. So when we use these funds, we have to be thinking about which students really need this acceleration focus. What are the ways in which we can accelerate? We're also hearing a fair amount of attendance challenges again this year. So are we willing to spend some of our resources on people who can work on attendance? Because if we can't get them in the class, we can't accelerate their learning. If we can't get them into tutoring, we can't accelerate their learning. So I'm seeing some effect of these attendance teams and added people who can do home visits, contact families, find out what's going on with the kid, because we're still seeing a decrease in the percent of kids who are attending, way lower than it was pre-COVID. So I want to be cautious about that, about how much we're doing in permanent funding if we don't have a plan that for attrition and growing new people into the profession, what can we do with that?
And I look forward to the transportation as well, because I think, sometimes that is our attendance issues here in our district. It makes it difficult for some families to have that do not have the transportation. So I think that's another great thing to think about as far as the attendance, but yes.
Yes.
But I think we're waiting to see if we think the proposition is 28 is going to go through. But if we don't get that, then the learning recovery grant will be a little different, right? Because we'll put some of the money into the arts.
Right.
But if we get 28, then we can use that money for other things. So I think that's an important, and just to really know what your students need, how you can accelerate their learning, what are some of the barriers so that you can use that money wisely.
Yep. Exactly.
Thank you, Doug and Nancy, or Doug and Kelly. Thank you. Sorry, it's just so used to saying Doug and Nancy. Questions. If anyone has any questions about this particular webinar, my contact information are on the next slide. Actually, we're going to Corwin Institutes. Please reach out to me. Again, Aaron Heintzman at corwin.com. There's my number. Again, if we want to kind of dive deeper into some of these funding options and other questions I could potentially answer, please just reach out to me. Actually, Cynthia, go back one slide, just our upcoming Corwin Institutes, November 3rd and 4th and 15th and 16th. Please go to the Corwin website to be able to have this opportunity for these virtual options. And then last slide, there we go. Thank you again for joining us today. This is the first in a 6-part series. And for joining today, you can go to the Corwin website. You can save 30% on some of Doug's newest titles right there. And it's also free shipping at this point in time. So please take advantage of that. You can also reach out to me if you need any sort of support for both book orders as well. Again, thank you to Peter, to Doug, to Kelly for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the webinar. Our next webinar is on December 13th with Peter Birdsall and also Vince Bustamante on the fiscal outlook for the upcoming year. So again, thank you for joining us today. Have a great rest of the week, okay?
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.